I never imagined it would come to this. Standing in my living room, I stared into my wife's face, grappling with the weight of her betrayal. My mind echoed a single relentless question. How could you do this to me? But it wasn't just the act that shattered me, it was her justification. She met my gaze, her eyes devoid of remorse. I did it for us, Aron, for your career. Her words hit me harder than the betrayal itself. I could barely breathe. She wasn't just lying. She was rationalizing it. My wife, with my boss, and all for a promotion. I wanted to scream, but my voice was trapped somewhere between fury and disbelief. The twisted logic of it all haunted me, and I struggled to understand how we had arrived at this point. Bella and I had met in college. It didn't take long for us to fall deeply for each other. She was my constant, a calm and steady presence in the chaos of life. In a world full of distractions, she was my anchor, the person I relied on most. As my career began to take off, she was always there, cheering me on and bolstering me when I doubted myself. Her support meant everything. Then came the company Christmas party, my first. I wanted Bella by my side to share in the world I'd been building. She looked stunning in that red dress, her favorite, but it wasn't just the dress, it was the way she carried herself, the way she lit up a room. That night, I introduced her to Richard, my boss. He was charming, too charming maybe. His compliments and effortless humor made her laugh in a way that left me feeling both proud and uneasy. At the time, I chalked it up to his natural charisma. Richard was always smooth, always engaging. But looking back, I can't ignore the way his gaze lingered just a bit too long, the way he emphasized how lucky I was to have her. What once felt like flattery now feels like something more sinister. Over the following weeks, Bella took an unusual interest in my work. She began mentioning office details she couldn't have known unless she was unusually observant. I assumed she was trying to support me. She was my wife, after all. You should spend more time with Richard, she'd say, her tone light and encouraging. He really wants to help you get ahead. Her advice seemed thoughtful, even wise. I trusted her implicitly, never once questioning her intentions. But now, in hindsight, I wonder, was she really helping me, or was there a deeper, hidden motive? One Monday morning, I sat in my car, preparing to head to work, when a notification buzzed on my phone. I glanced down and my breath caught. The subject line of the email read, "Congratulations, Aron, you've earned it." Fingers trembling, I reread the message in disbelief. A promotion? Now? It didn't align with the timeline I'd been tracking in my head. I had just wrapped up a major project and wasn't expecting to advance for several more months. Yet here it was. An enormous opportunity that seemed to materialize out of thin air. My heart raced as I opened the message, my eyes skimming over the formalities until they landed on the final line. "We're excited to see you step into this role. Let's discuss it further in person." I couldn't believe it. I wasn't ready. This wasn't supposed to happen yet. My mind swirled with questions, but all I could feel was a deep unease churning in my stomach. I needed answers. I had to talk to Richard. Walking toward his office, the usual nervous anticipation I felt before these meetings was replaced with an overwhelming knot of confusion. This was supposed to be a good thing, wasn't it? I knocked on his door, waiting for his familiar voice. "Come in, Aron." The office smelled of fresh coffee and polished wood, its usual inviting warmth now feeling almost claustrophobic. Richard was seated at his desk, his ever-present easy smile lighting up his face as he looked up from his papers. I tried to mirror his expression, but it faltered. Something was off, a sense of wrongness I couldn't shake. "Ah, Aron," he beamed, leaning back in his chair. "Congratulations, my man. Well earned. I was just about to call you in to discuss it." I nodded, the words sticking in my throat. "Thanks, Richard," I managed, though my voice came out smaller than I intended. "But honestly, I'm a little confused. This came out of nowhere. I thought I still had more time. Time to prove myself, to get ready. Why now?" Richard leaned back further, stretching his arms as though savoring his response. He gave me that look, the one that always made me feel slightly beneath him. "You've earned it, Aron. We've been watching you. You've put in the hours, shown dedication, and let's be real. Your talent speaks for itself. This is your time." I swallowed hard, struggling to keep my voice steady. But it wasn't supposed to happen yet. I wasn't expecting this. He cut me off, his smile unwavering. I know. You're surprised, but you've been working hard. You've got a lot of potential, Aron. You've proven yourself, and you also have Bella to thank for this, he said. The words hit me like a slap. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Richard chuckled softly, the sound unnervingly smooth. Bella, of course, he said as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. She's been such a big support to you, right? Encouraging you, pushing you to take the next steps. She's got great instincts, you know? That's what's guided you here. Bella? My thoughts reeled. What was he saying? How had she been involved? Bella? I asked, shaking my head. How exactly does Bella fit into this? She's never been involved with the office, Richard. How could she have helped me get a promotion? Richard leaned forward, his expression shifting into something more conspiratorial, like he was sharing a secret. She's been keeping me in the loop, he said, his tone almost casual. Giving me insights, little nudges about what you need, what'll help push you forward. You might not have realized it, but she's been behind the scenes, steering things in the right direction. That's what made this promotion happen. You're lucky to have her, Aron. I think you're underestimating her impact. He smiled again, that calm, almost patronizing smile that always made me feel small. Yeah, her influence. You've got a lot of support around you, Aron. Don't overlook it. As I left his office, the weight of his words bore down on me. Bella's involvement in my career? It didn't make sense. And yet, Richard spoke of it as if it were the most natural thing in the world. It felt like there was something hidden, something just out of reach that I couldn't quite grasp. I barely made it home before the need for answers overwhelmed me. My mind churned, replaying the conversation with Richard, but the more I thought about it, the more questions seemed to pile up. When I walked through the door, I didn't even respond to her usual greeting. Hey, babe, Bella called from the kitchen, her voice light and cheerful as always. How was your day? Different, I replied flatly, the weight of my words hanging in the air. I leaned against the doorframe, watching her chop vegetables, trying to steady my breath. I got the promotion, I added, my tone too casual. She turned around, her face lighting up with a smile. That's amazing, Aron. I knew you'd get it. She looked genuinely happy for me, but there was a flicker in her eyes, something fleeting and unreadable. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. Yeah, about that, I began, hesitation creeping into my voice. Richard said something weird. He mentioned that you helped make this happen, that you've been giving him insight into my career, advising him, pushing me forward. What does that mean, Bella? Her smile faltered just for a moment. Oh, Aron, she said softly, her voice almost apologetic. She paused, her hand lingering on the cutting board, fingers brushing the knife absent-mindedly. I didn't want to worry you. It's nothing. Richard was just asking for some advice. You know, about your career. I thought I could help. You're working so hard, and I just wanted to make sure things went smoothly for you. I took a step forward, my voice sharper now. Help? Bella, I don't understand. You're not even in the office. How could you possibly? Don't make this harder than it needs to be, she cut in, her tone suddenly tight, like she was trying to regain control. It's just advice. You're the one doing all the work. I was just helping guide you along. Her words felt rehearsed, too polished, too careful, and still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I stared at her, searching her face for any hint of the truth I couldn't yet articulate, but she only smiled and pulled me into a hug. It's going to be fine, Aron. Trust me, this is good. For both of us. I didn't feel fine, I felt confused. As I held her, the unease in my chest grew, and I couldn't shake the sense that I was being deceived. That night, sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, the questions churned in my mind, relentless and consuming. How deeply was Bella involved? How much had Richard shared with her? And what else was she hiding? I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust her. But my gut whispered that there was a truth I couldn't see, something dark, something twisted. I couldn't ignore the feeling that this promotion wasn't entirely about me. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching TV like we always did, Bella's phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a simple thing, but it struck a chord. I glanced at her. She was absorbed in the show, laughing at something on the screen, her attention elsewhere. I felt a surge of tension in my chest. Normally, Bella would check her phone right away. She always did. But not tonight. She let it buzz again and again. I stared at the phone. Why wasn't she answering? Casually, I reached for it, my hand trembling ever so slightly. Maybe it was just a coincidence, maybe I was reading too much into things, but something gnawed at me, something I couldn't ignore. The moment my fingers touched the phone, Bella's head snapped up. Her eyes locked onto mine and I froze, caught in the act. Her expression shifted just for a split second before she masked it with a smile. "Something wrong?" she asked, her voice light, almost too light. I quickly pulled my hand back, trying to play it off. "No, just curious. Who's texting you?" I asked, aiming for a casual tone, though inside I knew I'd crossed a line. She smiled again, but there was a subtle tension in her features. "Oh, just work stuff? Nothing important," she replied, picking up the phone and unlocking it with a swipe. I barely caught the flicker of panic in her eyes as she tapped the screen. Then it hit me. The phone was locked now. For the first time since we'd met, she'd put a password on her phone. A password. It was so subtle, so small, but it felt like a slap in the face. "Why the password?" I asked before I could stop myself. Bella gave me a reassuring smile. "Just being careful. You know, privacy and all." Her voice was too smooth, too practiced. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I didn't press the matter any further that night, but inside, my stomach churned. Why was she being so guarded all of a sudden? What was she hiding? The following week, things at the office took a strange turn. Richard started acting differently around me. He was too generous. At first, I couldn't put my finger on it, but it felt off. It started with small things. He'd pop into my office to chat about my latest project, offering unsolicited advice. "You're doing great, Aron, but I think you could push a little harder. Show them you're ready for the next step. Why not take on this new project? I'll get the paperwork done. It'll be a great look for you." At first, I appreciated the guidance, but then it kept happening. More projects, more responsibilities, tasks suddenly handed to me with no real explanation. And then came the trip. Richard called me into his office one morning, his usual smile wider than usual. "Aron, I've been thinking," he said, pacing around the room. "You've been doing great work, and it's time we got you more exposure. I want you to go to New York next week for a conference. It's a huge deal. I've already talked to HR. The flights are booked." I blinked, caught off guard. "Wait, what?" "I didn't ask for a trip to New York. I didn't even know this was happening." Richard waved his hand dismissively, as if it were nothing. "It's a fantastic opportunity, Aron. You need to be there. We need to show the higher-ups your face. It's all part of your career growth." His smile never wavered, but something in his eyes made my skin crawl. Consider it a step up, a good chance to make an impression. A trip to New York? I hadn't even been prepared for the workload I was already handling, and now I was being sent on a business trip I never asked for. My mind raced, trying to piece it all together. What did Richard gain from this? Why was he being so generous all of a sudden? It felt like too much, too soon. As I walked back to my office, my thoughts spun in circles. Richard was pushing me into things I wasn't ready for, throwing opportunities my way like they were gifts, but nothing was free. I knew that much. What did he expect from me in return? What was the catch? The next few days felt like I was walking on eggshells. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pulled into a game I didn't understand. Bella's behavior had grown more secretive, her phone always within arm's reach but never unlocked in front of me. Her answers felt too smooth, too rehearsed. And Richard, his generosity, his constant pushing. It all seemed like a well-rehearsed act, as if he were trying to keep me on the hook, distracting me from something bigger. I started keeping my distance from Bella, watching her every move, trying to figure out what she was hiding. Every time she left the room, I'd glance at her phone. Whenever she stepped away from the table, I'd check to see if she'd left anything out of place. And Richard? I watched him just as closely. Every smile, every compliment, every word he said seemed to carry a hidden meaning. I'm being played, I thought. But how? Then, one afternoon, after the New York trip had been finalized, Richard called me into his office again. A sharp unease churned in my stomach as I walked in, bracing myself for whatever was coming. He looked up from behind his desk, his eyes scanning me like a puzzle he was trying to solve. "Aron, I'm glad you're taking this trip seriously. It's important. You've got a lot riding on it, But remember, he paused, leaning forward slightly. You wouldn't be where you are without some. He trailed off, flashing a knowing smile. Never mind. The way he said it sent a cold shiver down my spine. His words carried a weight that felt both deliberate and elusive, their full meaning just out of reach. On the day I was supposed to leave for New York, Bella's excitement felt like a sharp, biting irony. She practically radiated enthusiasm as she helped me with my luggage, her every word buzzing with an energy I couldn't quite place. It was supposed to be a celebratory moment, the culmination of the promotion and the trip I hadn't even asked for. Yet, as we stood in the crowded terminal, something felt wrong. Her smile was too wide, her laughter a little too forced. It felt like she was trying to rush me along, nudging me toward the gates, her energy out of sync with the situation. Was I imagining things, or was she just too eager to see me go? I couldn't tell. Even as I walked through the airport, unease lingered. This trip should have been a celebration, something to be excited about, yet every fiber of my being screamed that something wasn't right. Bella's overly enthusiastic demeanor didn't fit. Her smile and words seemed forced, like she was trying too hard to seem supportive, too eager for me to leave. But why? I tried to brush it off as nerves, convincing myself it was just overthinking. This was my first big work trip, my chance to go to New York, and I should have been thrilled. But no matter how much I tried, I couldn't shake the overwhelming feeling that something was wrong. Every instinct screamed at me to stay, to cancel the trip. So I did something that didn't even make sense to me at the time. I canceled the trip. I couldn't go, not with this suffocating sense of dread. The taxi ride back home was eerily quiet, the hum of the engine the only sound, as I sat in the back, trying to make sense of what I'd just done. But as the cab pulled into the street near my house, something jolted me from my thoughts. Her car. Bella's car was driving out of the parking lot. My heart skipped a beat. Why was she leaving now? She was supposed to be at home. Questions started racing through my mind, piling up faster than I could make sense of them. Before I could even think, I leaned forward and told the driver, "Follow that car." My voice was strained, urgent. We followed her through the city, winding through unfamiliar streets until she turned into a small upscale hotel. It was the kind of place tucked away from the noise, quiet, discreet. I told the driver to stop and park behind her car in the lot. The hotel itself seemed innocent enough, but something about this didn't sit right. What was she doing here? I stayed in the cab, watching and waiting for what felt like an eternity. Bella didn't come back out. My mind was spinning with questions, each one more unsettling than the last. Then I saw it. The car I never expected to see pulled into the lot. Richard's. Richard? What the hell was going on? My pulse quickened as I watched him step out of his car, glancing around before heading into the hotel. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, and I couldn't move. This wasn't a coincidence. I paid the driver and stepped out of the cab, my thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and suspicion. I had to know what was happening. Walking into the hotel lobby, I tried to look as casual as I could, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. I approached the receptionist and asked for Bella's room number, but she wouldn't give it to me. Maybe it was the way I looked or something in my voice, but I knew I wouldn't get anywhere with her. I pretended to leave, but instead I turned down a hallway, my nerves thrumming with tension. I had no idea what I was doing, but I couldn't stop now. The hallway was dimly lit, the silence oppressive. Each step I took echoed faintly, amplifying the unease building inside me. Then, just as I reached the end of the hall, the door nearest to me swung open. Richard stepped out. His face went pale when he saw me standing there. His wide-eyed shock quickly turned to confusion, but I didn't give him a chance to say anything. I shoved past him, instinct taking over. I didn't want to hear his excuses. I needed the truth. I found it in that room. There, lying on the bed, was Bella, naked. Her body looked drained, as if she'd been with someone for hours. She glanced up at me, her face shifting from shock to unmistakable guilt. For a long, suffocating moment, neither of us said a word. The air between us felt heavy, the tension unbearable. My mind was spinning, unable to fully process what I was seeing. Betrayal, raw and undeniable, stared me in the face. It felt like a nightmare, one I couldn't wake up from. Before Bella could say anything, I turned and left. I didn't want to hear her voice, didn't want to know her excuses. I ran, out of the hotel, through the dim hallway, and onto the street. I bolted like I could somehow escape the pain clawing at me. Hailing a cab, I gave the driver my address and sank into the seat, my chest tightening with each passing second. The ride felt endless, though no matter how quickly we sped through the streets, I couldn't outrun the devastation gripping me. By the time I got home, I felt shattered. Everything I thought I knew, everything I trusted, had been ripped apart. The image of Bella, exposed and vulnerable on that bed, seared itself into my mind. Richard, someone I'd trusted, someone I had looked up to, his presence only deepened the wound. I kept replaying it all, every detail burning through my thoughts like a relentless fire. I barely made it through the door when I heard it, the sound of Bella's car pulling into the driveway. She was back. It had been only minutes, just enough time for her to have followed me the moment I left. My hands trembled as I dropped my keys onto the counter. I stood there, paralyzed by the chaos inside me, the betrayal cutting deeper with every passing second. The door clicked open. Bella stood there, her eyes wide with panic. She rushed toward me, her voice high and desperate, as if she could erase everything with words. "Aron, let me explain. You don't understand." She sounded frantic, trying to brush it off to make it seem like I hadn't just seen the undeniable truth with my own eyes. "Explain?" My voice came out quieter than I intended, though it carried a sharp, bitter edge. "Explain what? That you've been sleeping with Richard behind my back?" Bella froze for a heartbeat, the truth flashing across her face before she quickly masked it with forced confidence. Her voice trembled with desperation. "You don't understand. He promised to fast-track you for the promotion. I did it for us, Aron. You think I wanted this? It's all for you. Everything I did. Everything." She reached out to touch my arm, but I stepped back, creating more distance between us. "For me?" I whispered, disbelief thick in my voice. "You slept with my boss for me?" Her hands trembled as she tried to explain, her words tumbling over each other in a frantic, incoherent mess. "It was the only way. I couldn't watch you struggle anymore. He said he could help, get you the promotion you deserved, but you weren't getting the recognition. So I couldn't listen to it." The air felt suffocating, pressing down on me as the weight of her betrayal became unbearable. My thoughts spiraled, but one truth burned brighter than anything else. She had betrayed me. I looked at her, searching for the woman I thought I knew, the woman I had trusted with everything. But all I saw now was a stranger making excuses that churned my stomach. Anger bubbled inside me, hot and furious, but it was quickly overtaken by sorrow. A deep, gut-wrenching sorrow that felt like it would swallow me whole. I took a step back, my voice trembling as I asked, "I don't know who you are anymore, Bella. What have you done? How could you do this to me?" She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand, cutting her off. "No more lies," I said, my voice breaking under the weight of the moment. "No more explanations. I saw everything I needed to see." I couldn't look at her anymore. The woman I had loved, the one I thought I knew better than anyone, had become someone I didn't recognize. The sight of her twisted something deep inside me. Turning away, I muttered, "I need some time." My voice raw with pain. She reached for me again, but I didn't let her touch me this time. I walked out of the room, the door swinging shut behind me with the finality of everything that had just been destroyed. The world outside was a blur of pain and cold, as if the universe itself was intent on reminding me of what had been shattered in an instant. My mind was a relentless storm of thoughts, swirling with images of Bella and Richard. Their betrayal clung to me like a shadow, darkening my every step. Sleep was a fleeting concept, and even in the sanctuary of my own bed, the weight of everything pressed down on me, suffocating. It wasn't just the loss of trust, it was the loss of everything I thought I had known. Morning came, though I barely registered its arrival. Still, something deep inside compelled me to face Richard. This wasn't just about Bella, it was about him too. He had manipulated me, played me as if I were nothing more than a pawn in his twisted game. The thought of confronting him made my stomach churn, but I couldn't walk away without answers. The office felt colder than usual when I arrived, my heart weighed down and my gaze sharp with purpose. As I stepped into Richard's office, the tension hit me like a solid wall. He was sitting behind his desk, casually flipping through some papers, not even sparing me a glance. Yet, I could sense the smirk before it crept onto his face. "You look like you've got something to say, Aron," he said, leaning back in his chair. His voice was smooth and taunting, like this was just another day to him. I didn't bother with pleasantries. "What the hell is going on, Richard?" My voice was low, tightly controlled, but the simmering rage was unmistakable. "You used her. You used Bella to get what you wanted." Finally, he looked up, a lazy smile spreading across his face. "Aron, this is the real world. You think promotions come from hard work alone? You should thank Bella for her dedication. She did what had to be done for you to get ahead." The words hit like a slap, cutting deeper than I expected. He wasn't apologetic, not even close. He treated it like a trivial game, brushing it off with a smug grin as though it was nothing. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to keep control of the storm raging inside me. "She trusted you. She trusted you, and you used that trust to manipulate both of us. How could you do that?" His expression didn't shift. If anything, his eyes glinted with satisfaction, as though he knew he had already won. "You don't get it, Aron. People like Bella, people like you, are too naive. She wanted to help you, and I gave her the push she needed. This is how it works in the real world. You think you can play nice and make it to the top without a little assistance?" His tone was cold and calculating. "If you want to succeed here, you need to accept reality. Don't take it personally." I was seething, every fiber of my being screaming at me to lash out, but I held back, forcing myself to remain calm. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about power. His power. The way he manipulated people like Bella with calculated ease. Leaning forward, his voice turned serious. "Listen, Aron, you've got a bright future here. Don't throw it away over personal matters. You'll be fine. It's just how things work." I knew exactly what he was saying. It wasn't just words, it was a threat. A warning that stepping out of line could strip me of everything. The future he dangled in front of me, the promotions, the respect, was a shimmering illusion, built on lies and manipulation. I wanted to lash out, to let my anger explode, but I forced myself to stay quiet, even as my heart thundered in my chest. Finally, I met his gaze and said, "I won't stay quiet. You may think you control everything here, Richard, but you're wrong." For the first time, his smile faltered, just slightly, but the confidence in his eyes didn't waver. "We'll see," he replied. The days that followed were a haze of pain and disillusionment. The betrayal cut deeper than I ever could have imagined, not only in my personal life, but at work, too. How could I ever trust again, knowing that those I believed in were the ones who conspired to destroy my world? The office became alien to me. The hollow smiles, the empty pleasantries, everything was a facade, and I could no longer stomach it. I didn't belong in a place that thrived on lies and manipulation, so I made my decision. I would leave. My marriage was over as well. Bella and I talked, but the conversations were futile. The trust, the love, everything had been obliterated. No apology or explanation could undo what she had done. After days of agonizing reflection, I walked away from it all. My job, my marriage, and the life I had fought so hard to build. The pain was beyond words, but deep down, I knew it was the right choice. Was I so blinded by ambition that I didn't see the cracks? I wondered, staring at my reflection. Or were Bella and Richard just proof of how fragile trust really is? How easily it can shatter, leaving only broken pieces behind? As I turned to look out at the sprawling city below, something stirred inside me. A spark of resolve. Richard thought he was untouchable, above it all, free to manipulate and destroy without facing the consequences. But he was wrong. Richard thinks he's untouchable. But even kings fall, I said aloud, my voice cold and determined. And when he does, I'll be there to watch. I didn't know exactly what the future held, but one thing was certain. I wouldn't let him walk away from this unscathed.